Hi, welcome to the Internet Safety webinar. My name's Becky Heron and I'm the Child Exploitation Manager for Brighter Futures for Children. When we talk about internet safety, we're talking about modern technology. Modern technology can include the internet, obviously all forms of internet, broadband, Wi-Fi, mobile data, and that technology is within mobile phones, smartphones, tablets, laptops, desktops, cameras, games consoles. So throughout this webinar, we're going to be talking about all types of technology. It's important to remember that the internet and these modern technologies are an amazing resource. There are lots and lots of benefits to them. And I ask you to hold on to that fact because obviously the nature of this training session, we are going to be focusing on some of the risks associated with modern technology, some of the negatives and downsides to internet use. So please hold on to the fact that it is a fantastic resource for all of us. Whilst we have this fantastic technology, what it means is that for some perpetrators who are technically capable, it provides them with a massive opportunity, an opportunity to hide their identity, to have access to children and young people, to network with other perpetrators, but also give them a false sense of confidence. So something that they may not do in the offline world, they suddenly have a confidence to do because they're hidden behind a computer screen. Now, although I talk here about perpetrators, internet safety is not just about adults grooming children online to abuse them. There's lots of other factors when we talk about internet safety. And throughout this webinar, yes, we will be talking about grooming and abuse, but I'm also going to talk about inappropriate images, cyberbullying, and that includes peer-on-peer abuse as well as adult to child abuse. What I'm going to do is show you some popular examples of the types of technology or the types of apps and websites that children and young people are using. We can tend to group the apps and websites that are used into categories: social networking, social media, gaming, chat, location-based services, and dating or hookup sites. And I'm going to break these down for you, as I said, share some popular examples with you and talk to you a little bit more so you understand how these types of sites and apps are used by young people. The examples that I show you are obviously not an exhaustive list. There are thousands, if not millions, of different types of gaming sites, social networking sites, chat rooms, for example. I'm just going to pick some of the most popular at the moment. So if we start with social networking, exactly as it sounds, it's an opportunity to meet up with other people online and share information with them. A common example, something that's very popular at the moment, is Instagram. A user on Instagram sets up their own profile and they can upload photos or videos onto their profile to share with their followers. You can send somebody a follow request, or people can follow you. And if you're following somebody, then as you're scrolling through Instagram, you're able to access their photos, images, and posts that they've put online. The difference with Instagram over a social networking site like Facebook, for example, is that Instagram is predominantly image-based. It's encouraging the user to upload photos and imagery and telling your story and sharing your life through photographs. Photographs create a whole new dynamic when it comes to internet safety for children and young people. There's almost a competition to try and get the most likes on a post or to get the most followers or friends on a social networking site. And with sites like Instagram that are image based, the way to do that, or as young people feel the way to do that, is to upload the most exciting, interesting images that they can. That can lead young people to pushing the boundaries in what is appropriate imagery. And we have seen young people with Instagram pages where there's some quite provocative imagery on there to try and attract those followers. But also not just to attract followers, it's also because you want your friends in the real world to see you, you want them to see how popular you are, and you want to look good to other people. That desire to look good creates an additional pressure, and young people are increasingly using filters to portray the best image of themselves they possibly can. This is giving children and young people a very distorted view on beauty and impacting self-esteem quite significantly. Another very popular social networking site at the moment is TikTok. TikTok, again, encourages users to upload videos. So it's not photos, it's video based. It started off as an app called Musical.ly, where users were encouraged to sync over the top of a popular music video or to copy a current music trend or dance trend. So you would copy that music video or dance trend and upload your video onto the app. The name changed to TikTok, and its use has expanded greatly, and it's become one of the most popular apps currently. As well as the dance trends and the music, the lip syncing, it's also about posting funny videos and trying to make people laugh, but also provocative videos. There's some provocative dance moves, there's makeup tutorials showing somebody how good you can look. There's also filters within TikTok as well. And like all of the other social networking sites, you follow or friend request somebody, and then they can do the same to you. So you could be following 500 people, you could have 600 people following your profile. Social networking sites like Facebook and Twitter are obviously still around, but these image-based social networking sites like TikTok and like Instagram are becoming increasingly popular with children and young people. If we then move on to thinking about chat sites, there used to be lots of different chat sites, a chat room that you could log into and have a conversation with somebody else who was online. A very popular app amongst children and young people is Snapchat. And as you can see on the imagery here, you have your profile picture and a profile name, and people can add you. They can add you as a friend on Snapchat. You can then approve it, add them, and then you can share snaps between you. To share a snap, and it is an image-based thing, although you can write text as well, so young people use it as a messaging service. You send somebody a snap and it shows up on their screen for a short period of time. So that image that you've sent them shows on their screen for a few seconds and then it vanishes. Obviously, it doesn't vanish forever, and people can take screenshots. So you may think you're sending an image to somebody that's only going to be viewable for a couple of seconds and then it goes away, but they may screenshot it. There is a safety mechanism within Snapchat that's been built in recently that if that happens, you will get an alert to tell you that somebody has screenshot an image that you have sent them. Snapchat is the app king when it comes to filters. As you can see on your screen here, this young girl's used a funny filter, but there are also filters to beautify people, soft focus, different types of makeup, different types of glamorous imagery. So giving young people, again, a very distorted view of beauty, impacting children and young people's self-esteem and confidence when it comes to how they look and how they should look. There's also more basic chat sites, and WhatsApp is an example of that. So WhatsApp is a chat site where people send messages backwards and forwards. It's based on your phone number, so you have to know somebody's phone number. You send them a request and then you can start chatting to them. With any sites like this, WhatsApp, text messages, or any other chat site, we know that children and young people use their own language. Sometimes you look at it and you think, this is completely made up. They've lost all of the vowels, they've lost all of the consonants, there's no grammar, there's no punctuation. And that can be quite difficult for us as adults to understand. And I think that's part of the charm when it comes to children and young people chatting with each other, that they're safe in the knowledge that some of the adults around them wouldn't necessarily understand anything they're writing anyway. Children and young people will use abbreviations, common ones, LOL, LOL for laugh out loud. BRB is be right back. ROFL, rolling on the floor laughing. OMG. But then there's other ones like PIR, parent in room, or POS, parent over shoulder. These are things that a child or young person can message to their friend or to someone they're chatting to online to let them know that there's an adult in the room, that they're being monitored a bit more closely, to be careful what's being chatted about. And there's other abbreviations that are used in chat rooms and on different websites to get to know people. So things like ASL means age, sex, location. So it's a very short way of asking somebody, how old are you? What gender are you? And what part of the world are you from? There are many, many different types of chat room and chat sites, and some of them are linked to particular interests. So it could be a sport that somebody plays, or a team that they support, or a common interest, an activity, or a craft, or a sport, or a hobby, that have websites that have chat functions involved with them. Some of these chat rooms are public chat rooms, so there are lots of people all getting involved in the chat at the same time. But some of them encourage people to move out of that public chat and into a private chat, or encourage children and young people to share personal information like email addresses, profile names, or phone numbers, so that a public chat with somebody can move into a private chat on something like WhatsApp. Obviously, a private chat is much higher risk than a public chat room. I want to move on now to talk about something called location-based services, or you may have seen on your phones something called GPRS. Location-based services, exactly as they sound, they are apps and websites that base themselves around your location. Some of these are very helpful. You may click on a map to help you navigate to a location, so a sat nav. Some of them you may be able to click on a site and find out the local coffee shops in the area, or how to find a particular shop, or where the nearest service station is. But for children and young people, these location-based services are used in different ways and are often embedded into different apps and websites that they use. So for example, in Snapchat, there's something called Snap Map, which means when you're posting something onto Snapchat, your location can be visible to other users. So they can not only see what you have sent them, but they can also see where you are at any one time. A very good example of a location-based service is the app Pokemon Go. Now, if you're not familiar with Pokemon, you'll see in the middle of the screen here a little red ball and this little turtle called Squirtle. So Pokemon are characters, they're little creatures that are dotted around the country or around the world really. And the idea is that you walk around and you catch these little creatures. So you use this little red Pokeball and flick it at these animals or creatures and you collect them. As you'll see here on the left, there's a map. And this will be the map of your local area. So it will show the streets where you're stood. It will show the parks and any other significant points of interest, buildings, or significant points of reference in your current location. And the idea behind Pokemon Go is that you walk around that map. So you walk around your local area, you can approach significant points of interest to collect certain items, and your aim is to catch as many of these Pokemon as possible. Now, whilst this is a fun game, and it is often aimed at younger children, although lots of adults play Pokemon Go as well, you don't necessarily link up with people on the app, but like-minded people, other people who use this app, will also be walking around the streets. And when you find a point of interest, like on the right here, you can see what's known as a Pokestop. So this is a building that's got a marker on it, and when you approach it, you can spin that marker and it will give you gifts like new Pokeballs or different things to help you level up in the game. Well, if you've made your way to that significant point of reference, then other people playing the game might make their way to that significant point of reference. In which case, you see people in the street all looking down at their phone, flicking on the screens, and you can see from their movement that they're playing Pokemon. This creates a common interest. So being approached by somebody in the street and asked, "Oh, are you playing Pokemon Go?" sparks up a conversation. That conversation might seem harmless and fun and interesting because it's a fellow Pokemon hunter, but actually increases the risk to children and young people who are walking around collecting these Pokemon. It would only take an adult or somebody else to say to that child, "I've seen a really rare Pokemon, it's just down here, come with me, let's go and catch it together." And you can see the kind of risk that an app like this can create. I'm going to talk about some other location-based services in a little while, but technology is ever evolving, and location-based services are one of the newest evolutions. That not only are children and young people talking to people online or sharing information with people online, but they're also signalling to people their current location. And of course, that creates an additional risk in the real world, in the offline world. We also need to talk about gaming. Children and young people use games very frequently. PC, computer-based games, things like Fortnite or Roblox are very common, very popular at the moment, but also game consoles, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. All of these things nowadays are internet enabled. And what a lot of parents and carers and adults don't realise is that most of the time when a child or young person is playing a game, either through their PC, through their tablet, or through a console, they may be playing against somebody else, and that person could be somebody that they don't actually know. It could be somebody somewhere else in the world, doesn't even have to be local, someone else in the same country or in a different country. Often gamers will use headsets. So as well as interacting with someone else through the game, you're also interacting with them through that headset. So you're listening to them and you're talking to them. Now it's a game, so it might seem relatively safe, relatively risk-free. I think it's important to talk to you about a young boy called Breck Bednar. Breck Bednar was tragically killed by another young person, an 18-year-old male who had groomed him online. Beck was really into his gaming, his PC gaming, and he had a real passion for it. He had a passion for programming, and that led to him being groomed. He was befriended online by somebody that he played the game with. And because they were playing this game, there was a kind of camaraderie. They had a common interest, but they also joined up as a team. They helped each other out. So it was very quick and very easy to develop a bond and a trust between these two young people. That bond and that trust led to Breck actually arranging to meet up with this other person offline, which tragically led to his death. The death of Beck Bednar was a real shock to people. And I think that was for a number of reasons. Firstly, because it was on a gaming site. He was groomed on a gaming site. It wasn't on a social networking site. I think we often stereotype and think that the risks are on things like Facebook, but this was a gaming site. Also, he was a boy. And again, the stereotype is that the children who are groomed are girls. And this is not the case. Girls and boys can be groomed online. And I think the third factor was that he was from a very affluent, very well-educated family background. His parents were both professionals. He was a well-educated boy. Again, it's not the stereotype of a very lonely young person living in an area of social deprivation. This was a very affluent family background with very supportive, loving, caring parents. I think this just emphasises that it doesn't matter the type of technology or who the child is, these risks are out there. But I want to revisit that point I made right at the beginning. There are millions of children and young people who use gaming sites, game consoles, social networking sites, chat sites, without encountering any difficulties. Okay, so don't think that every child who is using any of these sites is at risk. Don't panic and think that you have to take away every child's computer, games console and smartphone. That's not the case. It is a small percentage of children and young people that encounter risk. Something I thought important to mention, and this is more relevant to young people and young adults, are dating and hookup sites. Now, I say dating and hookup sites because they are very different. There are some legitimate dating websites. They're usually membership based, so you have to subscribe, you have to pay money, and it is about finding you a like-minded partner to start dating. A hookup site is quite different to a dating site in that the purpose of it is getting one person hooked up with another person, often for the purpose of a one-night stand. Some examples of these sites are Tinder, where you swipe left, swipe right if you like the look of somebody. And then if they also swipe and say they like the look of you, it links the two of you up and you can start chatting. Grindr is very similar, but Grindr is aimed at gay males predominantly, And Grindr is also a location-based service. So it will show you when you log on to Grindr what other Grindr users are in your local area. So as well as chatting to somebody online, you're looking for somebody in your local vicinity. And the same with Happen, which is a much newer app. But Happen is looking at people in your local area. So you log on to Happen and it will show you people in your area and people you have come into contact with recently who are also on that app, enabling you to say, oh, I was just at a party, I was chatting to this person, now I've gone on Happen and I've seen their profile on there, I can start chatting to them again. Or I've been sat in the park and I've been eyeing up somebody who's sat near me, they look interesting, log on to Happen, see if they've also got a profile on there. If so, I can start chatting to them. So some of these hookup sites are location based because they're wanting you to find people in your local area, whereas dating sites could be people from anywhere else in the country, really. The same with social networking sites and the chat sites. There is a pressure for young people to look good on these sites. There is a pressure to put the best photo of yourself on there, to portray the best image of yourself. But there's also increased risks with the hookup sites and the location-based sites that you don't know who it is that you're meeting up with. Just because they have a picture on a profile, because they've said things about themselves on their profile, it doesn't mean that that's portraying the actual person. And obviously, meeting offline somebody that you have chatted to online is a huge risk. So, as with these dating sites, hookup sites, but also other chat sites, image-based sites, and cameras, web cameras, cameras that are embedded into your laptops, your tablets, and your phones, what we're finding is that young people nowadays are increasingly exploring and developing their sexuality online. They're doing that by testing the boundaries. They're doing that by pushing the boundaries also. So that could be nudity, taking photos of themselves, or nudity or sexual acts on web cameras with somebody that they fancy or with somebody that they're in a relationship with. So a child or a young person who would normally be too embarrassed to kiss their girlfriend or boyfriend, or get naked in front of their girlfriend or boyfriend, or do anything sexual in front of them, now has that anonymity and sense of security behind a computer screen or behind the screen of a mobile phone to do some of these things. So we are seeing increased and much earlier sexual development and sexual exploration. What we also see is children and young people having access to sexual information and imagery online. So the easy access to pornography, for example. And what pornography does is distorts the view between what is fantasy and what is reality. It distorts a child or young person's view on what is a healthy sexual relationship, on what is appropriate sexual development and sexual activity. Pornography also portrays a certain imagery, so how people should look, how boys should look, how girls should look, how they should perform. But also it doesn't provide positive messages, so there's no use of contraception in pornography. So all of these things are where a young person nowadays are getting their sex education, or a lot of their sex education. And as adults, we often veer away from talking to them about things like pornography, maybe because it's too embarrassing for us. But it's very important that we do discuss these things, because young people are accessing, and they're very easy to access. A lot of these sites are free, and it comes up on the screen saying, please click here if you are over 18, and you just have to click a button. So it's very easy for children and young people to access. So as adults, we need to make sure that we are providing appropriate and relevant sex education. And that includes talking to young people about pornography, talking to them about pornography and reality before they've even watched that pornography, so that when they do watch it, they can watch it objectively. That a child who is viewing something online can weigh up that this might not be what a healthy, loving sexual relationship really looks like. If as adults we're too embarrassed to talk to children and young people about this sort of thing, then we're basically putting them out there to explore and develop and learn for themselves. And they're going to learn something very adult, very graphic, very dangerous, and very distorted. This brings me on to the subject of sexting. Many of you may have heard that term, sexting. Sexting is sending someone a sexually explicit image or photograph or message. Sexting is illegal. It is illegal to make, distribute, or be in possession of an explicit image of a child. And a child is anyone under the age of 18. So even if I was 15 years old and I took a picture of myself and I sent that to my boyfriend, I have committed an offence because I have distributed that image. Even though it's of me, because I'm under the age of 18, I have committed an offence. My boyfriend who's received that image may not have asked for it, but now that he has that image of me, he is in possession of an indecent image of a child, and therefore he is committing an offence. Now, obviously, the law's not set up to criminalise children and young people like this. And a lot of it will depend on his next actions. If he looks at that image, deletes it, then it wasn't his choice to be sent that image. He's acted appropriately. If he views that image and then decides to show his friends, to forward that image on to some other young people, to share it with other young people at school, then he's further distributing it. He's acted inappropriately and he's committed an offence. There's a crossover between sexting and child sexual exploitation as well. So a child who takes a picture of themselves and sends it to somebody, maybe because they're in a relationship with that person, maybe because they fancy that person, that's not sexual exploitation. But if somebody has coerced, manipulated, or forced a child in sending them an image, or that image, once it's received, is then distributed or used for that person's gain in some way, then it starts to become exploitative. Sadly, sexting has become the norm amongst children and young people nowadays, and it is very prevalent. Most schools are having to deal with issues of indecent images of children circulating on a regular basis. It's something where we need to educate. We need to educate on not only the legality, but also the consequences. Once an image is out there, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to get that image back, especially if it's something that's been posted online. I was recently talking to a police officer from the Child Exploitation Online Protection Agency, and they were talking about a young girl that they had identified through some child sexual abuse images on the internet. There was a big investigation for a couple of years, and in 2014 they were able to identify this young girl and safeguard her. They also identified her abuser and prosecuted. And this was all based on images that were circulating online. Sadly, 6 years later, so 6 years after this child has been identified, protected, and the perpetrator prosecuted and imprisoned, 6 years later, the people at CEOP and at the Internet Watch Foundation, which is an organisation that investigates online abuse images, they still come across her images on average 5 times a day. So this is a young child who was abused. It was photographed. Those photographs were shared online. 6 years ago, she was protected, but those images are still out there. And I think that's a really important message for children and young people to hear, because they often don't think about the consequences. Everything nowadays is very instant. You can take a picture, send it to somebody within a matter of seconds. There's no thought process behind it. So talking to young people, educating them about the law, that this is a crime, the consequences both legally and the consequences of those images being out there, and the consequences of the shame, the embarrassment, the bullying, and all of the other things that come with that if those images were to get out and be circulated amongst your peer groups or amongst other people, is really important. I mentioned earlier that it's not just about grooming and it's not just about abuse, like sexual abuse of children. There are other risks to online activity, and one of them is cyberbullying. As it says here on this slide, all forms of bullying are significant. They can cause significant emotional and psychological distress to the victim. With cyberbullying, children and young people can feel vulnerable and powerless. They can feel exposed and humiliated, dissatisfied, angry, disinterested, isolated, anxious, depressed. And one of the things with cyberbullying is it's very difficult to get away from it. You can't just leave school at the end of the day, go home, close your door and escape from those bullies. That bullying is following you basically in your back pocket. It's in your mobile phone, it's in your tablet, it's in your laptop, it's everywhere that you go. And it's important to remember that mobile phones, social media, laptops, tablets, the internet is such a big part of children and young people's lives. It's not as easy as just saying to them, stop using your phone. It's not as easy as saying to them, well, delete that app. Because actually, children and young people may well get a lot of support from the same apps where they're being bullied. And also, I remember a young person saying to me a few years ago, they didn't want to come off of certain apps because they felt safer knowing what other children were saying about them. As hurtful as it was more hurtful and made them more anxious to think, if I block these people, I don't know what they're saying about me. I don't know what they're doing. Cyberbullying can take various forms. It's not just about name calling and being horrible to somebody. Yes, there's a lot of shaming, particularly around photographs, writing nasty comments, being critical when somebody posts an update of something on a social networking site, teasing them, making fun of them. But there's also things like outing somebody, so sharing their secrets publicly, sharing their secrets online with other people, or making up things about them, like lies or rumours. We also have incidents where young people pretend to be other young people. So they might set up fake profiles or send text messages or chat messages pretending to be somebody else. I've come across quite a few of these where young girls in particular have had a message from a number that they don't recognise, and that phone number are saying it's a boy in their class and it's a boy that they fancy, and they have a chat and the boy asks them out and they tell the boy that they like him and they arrange to meet up, and then those chat messages are shared online and they find that it was actually another girl from their school pretending to be this boy, tricking them in having that conversation and then outing them online and teasing them about fancying this boy. So fake profiles, trickery, pretending to be somebody else, all of those things also constitute bullying online. I think these two words, stranger and friend, are really important words at the moment and words for us to explore with children and young people. To us as adults, they seem quite straightforward. A stranger is someone you don't know, a friend is somebody you know and hang around with or share secrets with or spend time with. To children and young people, a friend can be very different. If you think of all of these social networking sites where you have followers and people can send you friend requests or be your friend online on your profile, the children and young people can have a very distorted view on what is a friend. Someone that we as adults might consider an acquaintance might be referred to as a friend, but also complete strangers, somebody you've never met before, a young person might refer to as a friend. That might be really difficult for us to get our heads round as adults, but we need to bear in mind that it's a very different world nowadays. And because of this online activity, children and young people are not thinking the same as we would do. When we use the word stranger, it gives quite scary connotations. You know, we used to have stranger danger lessons in school. But a stranger is anybody that you don't know. Well, if there's somebody that you don't know that sends you a friend request online, they've got a nice friendly looking profile picture. They start to chat to you and they come across as really friendly and caring and fun. Would you consider them a stranger? Because young people probably wouldn't. And I've had this conversation with young people. I remember talking to one young girl about getting into cars with strangers, and she was able to sit there and say, no, you should never get into a car with a stranger. It's really dangerous. It's stupid. You don't know who they are. You don't even know if they can drive. You don't know if they're safe. You don't know what they're going to do to you. And then I said to her, who was it that gave you a lift home last Saturday? She said, that's different. I said, why is it different? She said, I knew that person. They weren't a stranger. So I asked her, had you ever met them before? And she said, no. But I know them. I said, but how do you know them if you'd never met them before? Because they follow me on Instagram. So just bear this in mind. If you're working with children or young people and they're talking about a new friend, ask them a few more questions. Don't just assume that this is someone they go to school with. Don't just assume it's somebody in their local area that they hang around with. They're talking about a new friend, particularly if they're talking about meeting up with this new friend. You need to ask them a few questions. Who are they? How have they met them? What do they know about them? There are other concerns with children and young people's online activity, and that is being contacted by people that you know, but people who may not be good for you. Examples of this are children who are in care, who are being contacted online by biological family. Children in care who are making contact with their family members online. We may have risk assessments in place. There may be significant reasons why that child is in care. There might be court orders for supervised contact for that child's safety, yet they're then engaging online with those same people that we're trying to keep them away from. Another example is victims of domestic abuse, and where a perpetrator of domestic abuse may track down a victim or the children online and start having contact with them. This is just a different type of dynamic of the types of risk that young people can encounter online. So I need you to think about what sort of advice you could give a young person to protect themselves from bullying, abuse, or grooming online. Now, this puts a lot of pressure on the young person to protect themselves. Obviously, we need to remember we should also be reporting concerns. We should be reporting any potential perpetrators. We should be blocking and reporting to stop those perpetrators from having those conversations or trying to groom or bully children and young people online. We should be reporting them so they don't just move on to another child. But it's also crucial that young people understand how to keep themselves as safe as possible. Important examples of online safety are checking privacy and location settings. Most websites and apps have a default setting. So make sure that your privacy and location settings are set to private. So your photos, your profile pages, the things that you post online on TikTok or any of these apps are not able to be viewed publicly. And also turning off things like location services and location settings. So even if you are online, people can't see where you actually are. It's really key to remind young people not to meet up with somebody offline that they've met online, even if they take a friend with them. A lot of young people think that it's safer to take someone with them. Potentially, that's just putting two young people at risk. And we would say, unless you are taking a trusted adult, you shouldn't meet up with somebody offline. Asking young people to think very carefully about what information and what photographs they're sharing online. I often say to people, if you wouldn't say it or show it to your grandmother, it shouldn't go on the internet. We put a lot of personal information online, which can increase the risk to us. And it can increase risk in different ways as we get older. We know that employers nowadays will often do internet searches when they're looking into potential candidates for a job, and they will look at information that they find online to make a judgment as to whether this person is suitable to be employed. We also know that there are celebrities who have come up against much criticism for things that they have posted online many, many years ago. So it's really important to think very carefully about what you're sharing. When it comes to abuse or bullying, if somebody is having inappropriate or scary or bullying conversations, tell the young person to save the conversation as evidence, but don't respond to it. You should never respond to bullies because that's what they want. And the most important thing is to tell somebody if you encounter a difficulty online. Tell a trusted adult. It could be anyone. It could be somebody at school. It could be a parent or a carer. Could even be an older sibling. But tell an adult if you encounter any kind of difficulty. The reassurance is that that young person won't get into trouble, because they won't come and tell you about something if they think they're just going to be told off. I've also put there, it's never too late, because what we find is that some young people may have got involved in a chat conversation with somebody online. They may have had an inappropriate conversation. They may even have shared an image, and then that conversation has turned and become quite scary, maybe even threatening. And that young person feels that they can't report it because they've already engaged with that conversation. And this is why I say it's never too late to report it. It's never too late to stop what's happening. And I've just finished there with a caveat for adults, not to be over reliant on things like parental controls. They do serve a purpose, particularly for much younger children, where you don't want them accidentally clicking on certain sites or information whilst they're using the tablet or laptop at home. But as a child gets older, if you put too many restrictions in place for them, it will just push that internet use outside of the family home. That child or young person will use Snapchat whether you want them to or not. But if you have told them that they're not allowed it, they will do it in secret. If they're then doing it in secret and they encounter a problem, they're not going to come and ask you for help. So I always think, don't be too overly reliant on those parental controls. You also need to give children and young people some freedom. You need to educate them, and you need to emphasize the importance of coming to you and talking to you if they encounter any difficulties at all. I'm finishing here with just a couple of links that you might find useful. thinkyouknow.co.uk is a really good website with sections for children of different age groups, all the way down to 5 years old, with different cartoons, videos, activities, and information around internet safety. And there's also a section on there for parents and carers and a section for professionals. And then netaware.org.uk is an NSPCC website that highlights lots of the commonly used websites and apps, and provides information on how they're used, what do they involve, any parental controls, any privacy settings, and it's a really helpful source of support for parents and carers. So I would highly recommend spending some time to look at these two websites. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this webinar useful,